Welcome to the 2022 Catskill Regional Ag Conference. Our speaker tonight is Dana Havas. She's going to be talking about wool and fiber. So I think at this point, I'll turn it over to you, Dana. And if you'd like to introduce more about yourself and share your slides, that'd be great.
Thanks, Rich. I'm just going to move things around on my screen for a moment so I can better manage my end. So I am really excited to kind of recognize some of the names on the screen tonight. And I know some of you have plenty of experience. And so I'm going to encourage kind of a bit of a flipped situation. Please, if there's anything I'm saying or anything you want to respond to and help educate alongside of me, please do so, because I know there's so much knowledge in the room this evening. So I'm going to invite folks to share your knowledge. I'm also going to encourage if folks wouldn't mind just putting in the chat, and I know, Rich, this is going to probably make things a little difficult for you, and I apologize, but if people want to put their name and, just a little bit about your, like, don't write a paragraph, but like your name, your farm, where you're located, so we can get an idea of where you all are. Yeah, so name, farm, location would be great. I invite people to kind of just get familiar with who's here. Okay, so in that case, I'm gonna set up my share screen and let me know if there's any issues. Okay, hide myself so I don't have to watch me talk. Okay, so I was gonna talk with you all tonight about preparing your wool for market. So market channels, production, and preparation. And there's a lot of information. I'm gonna stop throughout and just kind of check to see if there's any questions, any comments, any discussion happening that I need to be a part of, and you'll know when those moments happen. You'll see that most of what I'm talking about, I reference sheep, but this isn't just about sheep. It's about goat, alpaca, goat, mohair, and cashmere. So there are certain points that are very much sheep oriented, and I'll try to point them out, but a lot of this is relevant to all the fibers that are produced by animals. Yeah, okay. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so how I'm going to go through tonight, I'm going to just kind of start off with a little bit of background. You should have gotten, or you will get, a kind of like a follow-up couple of documents, and in that has definitions. I encourage you to wander through there. A lot of resources. I encourage you to check out those resources, a lot of web pages and whatnot that are wonderful. So those aren't going to be in background that I'm going to share with you today, but they're background that I encourage you to look at later on. I'm also going to talk about the 3 supply chains, kind of a very brief overview. And then I'm going to go into more depth with each of these supply chains, kind of production practices, preparation practices, and then expected what you can be thinking about in terms of costs and prices. If there's time, I'm going to touch on breeds, genetics, and nutrition, with the caveat of understanding that I am not a geneticist nor a nutrition expert. So it's a very kind of brief overview, and I'm sure that many of you, like I said, I recognize some of your names. You know much more about that than I do. So I'm just going to kind of give an overview for those who are new or just beginning to think about this. Okay. So before I get started, I was going to do a quick introduction. I've been involved in the fiber community since 2017. I helped to find, I was a founder of Local Fiber, an organization based in the Finger Lakes of New York. And it's just this wonderful organization. If you want to check it out at some point, I encourage you to do so. It's in the resources. It's now farmer driven, farmer run, and they're doing some pretty amazing things. They just wrapped up a pop-up shop that was hosted in downtown Ithaca, and it was really successful. It was just lovely. Yeah, so my point is I've been involved in the fiber community since 2017, and my graduate research was around the financial analysis of production and marketing. We developed a New York State branding report, and we also did some research on consumer demand of New York State woolen goods. And since July of 2020, so not last year, but the year before now, I can say, I've been with CCE Cortland, which has been a dream job, and I couldn't be happier. So I'm so happy to be part of the CCE community. But that's not what you're here to hear about. You're here to hear about wool production, marketing, and preparation in terms of the supply chains and marketing. So I'm just going to get going on that. So very, very brief overview, right? I want to first start off with some definitions for those of you who aren't familiar. And those of you who are, again, share your thoughts in chat. So wool pool, it's really, the wool pool creates an opportunity for producers to pool their wool, right? Group together through typically a cooperative organization. You pool your wool and you can sell it now to the commodity chain. So it makes the commodity chain available to wool producers in our region, especially as it wouldn't have been available before, just because of the volume, really. Value added, what I mean by value added is this is when one or a group of producers will come together and actually navigate the supply chain themselves and then direct market or retail market to the customer. And I just want to be clear that when I say supply chain, I mean supply chain from you, the producer's perspective, right? So it's you're navigating this supply chain, you're navigating the value add supply chain. And then, of course, there's this artisan or hand spinner supply chain. And I separate that out from the value added because it is from you take the wool off the sheep and you sell it to the end market. It's that quick. That's the supply chain. But there's different considerations that we want to have in mind for each of these supply chains. And I call them considerations. I didn't want to call them pros and cons because everybody has a different skill set and everybody is going to think you're going to think that something's difficult and somebody else will look at that and go, I can handle that. So I want to call them considerations. I'm not going to read them through. I'm just going to kind of point them out. And I think you get these slides later too, but this is just touching on it. It is not in depth, but just some things to get you to start getting you to think about, what supply chains you might want to navigate in. And if you choose to navigate in them, some of the thoughts and things that you want to think about in making those decisions. So for instance, of wool pool, it's going to be a pretty low price per pound wool, but so this says guaranteed market. I want to take the word guaranteed out of it. It's very specific. They tell you what wool you can bring. And then it's not uncommon for wool pools to cancel every other year. So they're yearly wool pools, but they decide not to go this year because the price isn't quite what they're hoping for. So it's not a guaranteed market. It's just I'll flag that one for adjustment. Anyhow, so value added, you're going to potentially get a higher price per pound wool than a wool pool, but this is going to take some accounting on your part and some work on your part that is not going to be involved in the wool pool supply chain. You're going to need some upfront capital. You're going to need a place to store your inventory. You're going to need some marketing skills, and you're going to have to navigate that supply chain yourself that you're going to be going through to create an end product. And then, of course, the hand spinner or artisan market, again, potentially even a higher price per pound wool, but again, counting, right? So it doesn't mean you're going to get more money. You have to do the work in order to make that true. And that work requires more effort in some ways. One of the things that's interesting to point out in this market is you are going to have a much smaller consumer market. Right. So you can imagine the people who are going to be hand spinning are much fewer than the people who are going to be putting on socks. Right. So just some things for you to think about as you're considering the supply chains. Okay. And each of these supply chains are related to one or two market channels. Right. So the wool pool is a commodity channel. The value added is this direct market and or retail market channels. And then the hand spinner artisan is really direct market. In some cases, there'll be some retail market opportunities for the hand spinner and artisan, but it really is the direct market. So you're selling directly to the consumer. Okay, so let's look at the commodity market channel for a moment.
Dana, I'd like to jump in.
Yeah.
Here. You mentioned the resources, they are available. I put the link in the chat. It's the same location where you can go to get the links for the various sessions. And you would ask people to introduce. many people did. So I just want to quickly run through that so we know that who's all here. So Catherine Davis in Troy, New York, in Rensselaer County is here. Juliana, located in Enfield, New York, close to Ithaca, has Viva Acres, raising Icelandic sheep. Ben Hepler in Halstead, Pennsylvania, is a beef cattle farmer, but interested in raising sheep and is trying to figure out whether he should go with wool or mohair. Tatiana Stanton is the state extension specialist who raises goats, and she has in the past had wool sheep and Angora rabbits for a few years. Then we have Kim in Bloomville, a longtime sheep producer, but very little focus on wool. Jonathan Alt in Porterville, New York, ARR Farm and Sojourner Farms, producing grass-fed proteins and using regenerative practices. Hannah Ray Warren and Eduardo Lacayo in Danby, New York, near Ithaca. Carolyn Scobie from Brookside Maple and Farm in Delancey in Delaware County, raising Romney sheep, white and natural colored. And Shauna McKenna from Quebec, Canada, has a North Country and commercial flock, mainly market lambs, and trying value added in wool recently. And then Karen Hoffman in Norwich, New York. She's the NRCS state grazing specialist, and she raises Dorset sheep and beef cattle. So those were some of the people who introduced themselves. So thank you to everyone. And Dana, there you go. That's something about your audience.
Lovely. Thanks, Rich. Thanks for kind of taking the moment and pointing that out and sharing each of those little stories. It's just really lovely to kind of get a bit more of a picture of who's out there and for you to all know who each other are too. Okay, so I'm going to step back, right? So these market channels, commodity market channels, what we're looking at. So there's 5 sheep wool pools in New York State. And I specify sheep wool pools because, right, that's, I'll get into that. So the asterisk, what I mean by the asterisk is that, so while I say there's 5 sheep wool pools, I know at least one of those pools does have opportunities for Angora and alpaca. And then there's the New England Alpaca Fiber Producers Association based out of, I'm gonna make it up. I'm just gonna say New England. And they actually do collective purchasing for alpaca fiber as well. So that's what the asterisks about. And the 5+, I honestly can't remember why I put the plus there. I feel like it should be 5 plus or minus, just kind of what I was saying earlier is that, you know, some years a wool pool might not run and other years they might run. So it's, you kind of have to, you know, stay abreast of who's doing what, and I'll get into how you can do that. They do only accept specified fibers. You get a letter at some point through the year and it says, we'll take clean white wool and off sorts. And that's the option. And I'll get into it later about kind of what can be in, what exactly is clean white wool. In order to get on the list, you're going to need to call and just say, hey, you know, I'm interested in your wool pool. How can I get on your list? And sometimes this involves becoming a member of the cooperative. Sometimes they're just, oh, we'll put you on the list. Don't worry about it. And then you'll pay those cooperative fees later on. Again, that's all in the resources document. That I have a list in there of the 5 wool pools in New York State and how to access them in that resource document. And if you're not on the Cornell Sheep and Goat listserv, I highly recommend you get on that listserv. It is such a wealth of information. If you ever have a question, you just go on there and you type it in, you get answers. But I do know of at least 2 wool pools that I've seen regularly alert the community to the fact that their wool pool is happening this year, and they might even share a bit more details about the prices and whatnot you can expect. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to step over to direct sales. So this is the value added chain, and then the artisan market chain are really going to tie into this direct sales. And again, what I mean by direct sales is you, the producer, are doing whatever you want to the fiber, and then you're selling it to your end consumer. They can do whatever they want with it afterwards. Like the artisan market, for instance, they actually might be turning it into value add and selling it on themselves. But concerning you, that's their direct market, and that's your end consumer, and that's your supply chain. So the direct sales market. The direct sales market typically is through festivals, farmers market, online, word of mouth. And there's things to consider about each one of these, right? So festivals, there are a myriad of festivals throughout the year. And again, there's a list in the resources. I'll stop saying that. And so it may be one time a year, but you can pretty much hit you can be busy year round with festivals. Farmers markets, that's weekly and seasonal, and the farmers markets are going to have their own rules about who can be there. Everyone, if you're doing direct sales or retail sales, you should absolutely have some sort of online presence, at the very least a Facebook page. But you want a way for your customers that have found you at the festivals and found you at the farmers market to be able to find you later. And that's going to play an important role when we get to this word of mouth, which is like the cream of the crop. If you got into word of mouth and people are talking about you and sharing you, you've done well. So festivals, farmers markets are a great kind of, what do you call it? Like a pilot, at the very least a pilot, but you want to have that online in order to get to the word of mouth. Okay, so there are some things that you're going to need, right, in order to tie into these direct sales market. And that's a TIN or a EIN, or you can use your social security number. And that's like not something, I'm not going to sit here and say, do this or do that. I'm going to say, you want one of these three, talk to a consultant. It can be somebody at one of the, oftentimes credit unions will have business consultants who can help you make this decision. I think here it says like FarmNet, Small Business Administration. Your tax preparer can help you get your certificate of authority. That's to collect sales tax. And then there's all this stuff around sales tax. Different counties are going to have different tax rates. And then you also want to bear in mind, there's a thing called Schedule H. And if you are selling a product that could be considered clothing or could be used to create clothing, then you can actually apply for a Schedule H. It's not you apply for it. When you do your taxes, you don't include, I think it's the New York State, and you can, so it's like half the tax rate. So anyhow, just definitely talk to a tax preparer and business consultant and just kind of have that Schedule H in mind and ask about that later on. Okay, so it's really important that when you're going to direct sales, you want to do your reconnaissance, right? So you want to visit these festivals, these markets, you want to understand the online shops. Things you might want to ask: who are your customers? Who are the customers who are showing up at those locations? What products are they buying? What products are people selling? What price are people charging? What price are people spending? Who are the vendors? Chat with them a little bit. Learn about like what they think the pros and the cons are of that location. And then you also might want to check out what some similar products are that are being offered and finding out what's unique about what you have to offer. And this is really important. This kind of gets into branding, right? Your unique value proposition. And I feel like that's a whole other class workshop discussion, and maybe sometime I'll put that together. But yeah, finding out what your unique value proposition is and how it fits into that location, into that customer base. And so this is a lot of work that you have to do behind direct sales in order to be sure that you're successful. See if I can get it to move forward again. Let's see. Okay, and so this set of questions really have to do with festivals and farmers markets, though you might see a few that tie into the online. Right, there's going to be costs and considerations to think about with the festivals and farmers markets, things you're going to want to find out from that market manager. Like, what is the cost? What are the rules? Right, so you think of farmers markets, and some of them might, like, they have very specific and strict rules you have to pay attention to, or you have to pass in order to sell at that market. If it is a festival, how far is it from home? Do they have a location where you can set up an RV, or do you have to rent a hotel? How do they advertise? What's the expected attendance? Do you need to bring a pop-up tent, or do they have some sort of shelter that you're going to set up under, right? So these are just some questions to get you thinking about what things you might need to think about in order to do the direct sales at festivals and farmers markets.
Dana, we did have a question in the chat wondering if fiber farms have to file a Schedule 8 or a Schedule F.
That is a good question. I'm going to invite people in the chat to answer that, because I know there are some folks out there who are pretty adept at that. But I don't know off the top of my head. But I'm gonna invite other folks to share that. And then I can always get back to you if nobody answers that currently, I'll find out and get back to whoever asked that question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so then the retail sales, it's really kind of focusing with like the value added supply chain is really the supply chain that's going to be working in the retail sales. And by retail sales, I mean wholesale and consignment sales. And I'll kind of get into the difference between each of these. But first, I want to kind of point out the kind of before the negotiating phase and then things to consider with this limit. So before you approach retail sales, you really want to identify your recommended retail price and your limit. And by recommended retail price, that should be what you're selling at. If you are going to be selling direct to the consumer, what is that price? And that should be the same price that they sell in the stores. And it might actually be difficult if you ask them to go higher than that. They might not want to do that because they don't want the competition in that way. Limit, what I mean by limit is the lowest you're willing to go. And there may be some things that make that flexible. It may have to do with how many units you'll sell. Like, so if you have a higher unit sale, you could maybe lower that limit. So there's some, if that makes sense to you, like units meaning items, number of items of that particular product. So yeah, you're definitely going to want to know the recommended retail price, which should be the same as your direct sales, and the limit that you'll go, the lowest price you'll accept for a certain set of units. So when you're negotiating with wholesale, you want to start in your favor. You want to start like a 30-70 favor. So they get 30, you get 70. And then you're going to let them negotiate up to your limit, right? So if 50-50 is your limit, because you know your number that you need there, you don't want to start there. You want to start more in your favor and then let them negotiate to the 50-50. Consignment, you're actually going to walk in the door and ask them what their consignment percentage is, and then you're going to negotiate with your limit. And their consignment percentage might be great, and that's that. But I encourage you to try to negotiate regardless. So things you want to consider when you are establishing your limit. Can you make a profit from that wholesale price, right? And this goes back to that unit, and it's the next bullet point is how many units do you need to sell in order to make profit at that wholesale price? And then something that the market is more likely to consider, but you want to bear in mind is that market the kind of place that the customer who attends there or shops there can pay or is willing to pay that corresponding retail price. And that's something when you're doing your reconnaissance about the different markets that you want to approach, that's something you want to think about is what is the price point here? And can I get what I need in order to sell at this location? Okay, so wholesale considerations. With wholesale, like it's the same kind of thing as the considerations we thought about before, right? There's positives, there's negatives, and it really depends on you and what you're willing to do. So with wholesale, you're going to receive that payment up front. They have a vested interest in selling your product, so they're going to make it look really nice in their stores. You can set order minimums to ensure profit. If your product doesn't sell, it's unlikely they'll purchase from you again. That might be an argument to start with consignment and then work your way to wholesale with them. You have once you've given your product up, you have no control over it. But at the same time, you've already sold it, so you don't have to worry about it coming back to you. Capable to fill orders the deadline, and then of course start with a higher cut that we just had mentioned. And then consignment considerations, you're going to receive payment on sale. So not when you sell it to them, but when they sell it to the customer, you'll receive payment after that. Actually, not even at that moment, obviously, right? It is a great way to establish a new relationship with the market. You can be very flexible with your inventory. Like if you're heading off to a festival and you're like, oh my goodness, I really need those things around that shop. Like, you can go and maybe work it out that you can grab it and go to the festival. You want to be careful with that relationship in that way, but you're more flexible with your inventory. Again, commission may be greater than 50%, which would be wonderful. the unsold items are returned to you. And then in some ways that's nice, but in other ways you have to think about that means people have probably been handling these products and you have no control over them handling the products while they're in their store. You're going to want to track your inventory. It may require more running around. And then, like we said before, you can ask them what their consignment rate is and you can bargain from there. Again, know your limit. Okay, and then I'm just actually going to leave this up. These are kind of like just steps to building a retail relationship. And while this is up here, I was just going to kind of give some space and let anybody ask any questions if there are any, or say any statements or any of that.
There's no new questions in the chat, but Lynn Mortis from Dashing Star Farm organized her business as an LLC, files a Schedule F, which is also necessary for the New York Ag Assessment Program for farmland and buildings. And she also needed to obtain a New York sales tax ID and file returns paying in the sales tax you collect if doing retail sales, and indicated that you get 5% back of all sales tax you collect. Lynn, if you wanted to say something more about this, you should feel free to unmute yourself and share what you know.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so I've been in business selling wool products for many years, both raw wool, finished wool products in terms of yarns, hand knit items, all kinds of wool products. From my farm, I also sell a lot of meat too, which is thankfully not taxable. Sales tax, collecting sales tax and filing returns is getting easier now because you can do it online. There are thresholds for sales tax in terms of how often you have to pay it into the state of New York. I'm assuming most people on this are New York State people. But if you're under a certain monetary threshold, you only have to do it annually, which is a lot easier than having to do it quarterly. But I recommend highly keeping, you have to have really good bookkeeping in order to keep track of all your sales tax, because you want to keep track of what county you collected it in, because that's the way you have to file the return with New York State. Every county has a different tax rate. So you need to be able to know which county you collected it in, how much in each county, and be able to file a return. I use QuickBooks for my accounting system, so it's very easy for me to have that taken care of and organized in that way, so I can just dump out that information, put it in the return, and it makes it very simple. The other thing about wholesale orders is in the event you ever risk getting audited, you want to make sure you have those sales tax exemption certificate or resale certificates from the buyers, because I can't tell you how many times, especially at the New York State Sheep and Wool Festival, people will come up to me and say, oh, can I buy wholesale from you? This is a wholesale sale. And unless they give me a resale certificate or a sales tax exemption, they are paying sales tax. A lot of people will try to avoid paying sales tax. Oh, can I pay you cash and not pay sales tax? That happens frequently. But let me tell you, they ran a sting operation from the Department of Taxation and Finance one year at the Sheep and Wool Festival, and they nabbed a whole bunch of people with fines for agreeing not to take sales tax. It's your obligation as a business in New York State to follow the laws and collect sales tax when you're supposed to. You can't give people, you can give somebody a discount if you want off the retail price, but you have to collect the sales tax. That's just the way it goes. So for people who are new to selling their wool, just be very mindful of these things, because it's something you just have to be aware of. In any business has to be aware of. There are a lot of rules that you have to follow. In terms of consignment, I don't do consignment at all anymore for wool products because wool products are sensitive products, and you don't know how whatever business you consign them to might handle them or put them out, or whether they have a moth infestation or something. And I don't recommend it. I've done consignment in the past with an ironclad agreement where after a certain number of days, the person I've consigned to has to pay me the full price for the item. And that's it. Or, they own it after a certain number of days and they have to pay for it, or they have to return it. And if there's any, and then you want to make sure you have an agreement, a legal agreement for that, so that in the event that the product is damaged while it's in their possession, that they are responsible for compensating you for that anyway.
Thank you, Lynn. That was quite a good answer. It let us all see how complicated it can be, or not necessarily complicated, but if you understand it, you can do the right thing. We did have one additional person ask if specifically about Etsy, if Etsy takes care of the sales tax. I don't know if anyone knows the answer to that. Otherwise, there's no additional questions here in the chat.
I think Etsy does charge sales tax for people. The one thing with Etsy now, and in fact, my daughter works for Etsy, so I know a little bit more about it, although I don't use it because I have my own website. I believe they do calculate the sales tax for you. And I use Wix as a platform for my website, and they calculate the sales tax based on my location. So they're only charging Dutchess County, New York sales tax to anybody in New York State who buys it, and they don't charge sales tax out of state. Since I don't have a physical location out of state, I don't have to worry about that. But you know, you have to make sure that you're only located in one state if you're not going to charge sales tax in other states. And those rules are changing a lot for businesses. A lot of businesses are being forced to charge sales tax no matter where the hell they ship. You know, it's getting very complex.
I think one thing that Lynn is pointing out here, and I kind of want to emphasize it, and for those of you who are new to the community or young in the community, it really is like, talk to other farmers, especially folks like Lynn who have been doing this for years. And I think that's why like organizations like Local Fiber or the Hudson Valley Textile Project, or even just any groupings of farmers, like breed associations even, you know, if you can just meet other folks who are doing what you want to do, they are the best resource. So I highly recommend, again, Local Fiber, Hudson Valley Textile Project. Talk to your neighbor who's raising the border Leicester that you're wanting to raise. Like, it's just the best resource are the other folks who are doing this. So thanks. So Lynn, thank you so much for adding your voice. That's really, really valuable. And
oh, you're welcome. If anybody needs to reach out to me, they can access me through the contact page on my website for dashingstarfarm.com.
I encourage you to put your name and email in the chat so people can have that.
Will do.
Awesome. Thank you. Were there any other questions before I move along with the other components of tonight's discussion?
There's nothing more in the chat.
Great. Okay, in that case, so, you know, one thing I did want to point out is that it's really, and it's not uncommon. In fact, it's more common than not that you're actually going to be dealing with all of these market channels, right? If you're selling to the artisan market, you're likely also turning something into yarn. And what are you going to do with the stuff that's not garbage, but you can still do something with, but you don't want to turn it into anything? You're going to drive it up to the wool pool, or you're going to work with a friend to get it to the wool pool. It's not uncommon to actually navigate all three of these markets to some extent. Okay, so now I'm going to dive in a little deeper into each of these, talking about, again, an overview, what you want to do, production, preparation. These are very kind of like, I'm doing the high level, right? I'm not digging down into the weeds. Each of the weeds would take so much time in its own. And actually, I'm going to put a shout out. There's a wool pool webinar happening on February 8th, which we will be digging down into the weeds. And there's a preparing for shearing webinar on the 1st, and we will be digging down into the weeds a little bit more, but this is kind of like a broader overview. So when I say production, I mean everything prior to the shearing, right? So it's, is it prior to shearing? It's at the moment of shearing is the separation between production and preparation is what that's the moment I'm defining between the two. And then of course, we'll talk a little bit about prices and costs and what you want to be thinking about in regards to those for each of these supply chains. Okay, so we talked about this before, right? A wool pool is a location to collectively sell your wool to the commodity market. This says like purchase with confidence that the uniformity is accurately represented. That's much more relevant to kind of more the Western areas than it is to the Northeast. Our wool tends to be collected and sold in very limited classes, and we'll look at that in a minute. But still, the point here is that the buyers are anticipating a certain product. And so the wool pool, if you're properly classing the wool pool, the buyer can feel confident that the wool they're receiving is within that class. So this is, again, a very high overview of what happens with a wool pool, right? So the cooperative, every wool pool runs differently too. So this is like this, somebody out there might be like, that's not how my wool pool works. And you're probably right. So the wool pool will ask for bids, and this is usually a few months before the pool. And then this expected price that you'll receive will typically be sent out in a letter to the members of the pool. And again, that price is linked to the reputation to some extent, right? Actually, I was talking with somebody earlier today, and the warehouses are backed up with wool, and prices are super low. And that's not so much, has nothing to do with quality. It has to do with there's no place for the wool to go right now. So nobody's buying it, and the prices are low. The wool pool's held, and you can pretty much expect to spend some of your time volunteering that day. Some people will hang out all day and volunteer at the wool pool. It's a lovely networking and chatting opportunity, but it's also a good long day that I'm sure you can think of plenty of other things that you like to be using your time for. And you will receive a check at a later date, right? And you're not going to walk away with the check that day. You're going to receive a check, I don't know, a couple months later, maybe even close to a year later in some cases, depending on how the bidding and selling process occurs. Okay, and like wool, if you go to the store and you buy something wool, it's coming out of the commodity market, right? So, and excuse me, I'm sure many of you already know this, and but a lot of the stuff that we see in the stores is actually probably more South African wool or Australian, New Zealand wool. But the point is that the commodity market is producing, like, you see something wool, if that's the commodity market. So tennis balls, upholstery, batting, blankets, etc. Think of it made of wool. I know I recently read that BMW, I think, is starting to do their upholstery in their cars again as wool. I'm guessing commodity market, but I could be wrong. Okay, so production, right? So with the wool pool, you do want to make an effort to keep vegetable matter at a minimum. And right, so if you bring a fleece to the wool pool that is covered in vegetable matter, one of two things: they're going to either say, no, take that home with you, or you're decreasing the reputation of that clip for that buyer in the future. So yeah, keep that vegetation down to a minimum. There's a couple of ways of doing this, right? You can fencing or weed control, keep burdocks out. If you have burdocks in your wool, just put it in the back and let it decompose for the next 30 years or so. But yeah, so fencing and weed control. Don't bed with hay or straw for at least a little bit of time prior to the shearing day. Marking paint, you want to be really judicious with marking paint. You want to only use paint that's deemed scourable. But even scourable paint, I think it's red. I think it's the red paint that even the scourable ones that are labeled scourable, don't always wash out. So avoid red paint altogether if you can. And then otherwise, try to use the stuff that's labeled scourable, because you don't want that marking paint showing up in the wool pool wool. And then definitely don't house or pasture with hair sheep while they're shedding. If hair shows up in wool at wool pool or anywhere, it kind of gets tagged and put aside as garbage. So it's going to decrease again that quality and that reputation of that clip. Okay, so preparation. Okay, so this is kind of shearing, skirting, etc. You're going to want to appropriately group and order the sheep into the skirting, into the shearing floor. And this is really going to be keeping color separate, keeping black face. You don't want to shear black face with a pure white sheep. You want to keep long wools and fine wools separate if you have a variety different type of sheep that you have around. You just want, there's a bunch of different documentation on how to group, and you can just kind of follow ASI's recommendation on grouping your sheep and you'll be fine. You do want to sweep floor, especially between the different groupings. Again, if if the hair or if the black gets into a white, well, that's ordering, and ordering, you should take care of that. But the sweeping just kind of helps move that along. So in skirting, you want to properly throw your fleece. And the whole idea behind this is when you're throwing your fleece, that's the picture on my left, on your left too, I'm guessing. Throwing your fleece, you're getting rid of those second cuts. And with anything you can do to improve without over committing your time for wool pool is great, because you're helping that wool pool down the road. So throw the fleece, get rid of second cuts if you can. Definitely do remove the stains, tags, skin pieces, etc. Just get rid of them altogether, clumpy matter, etc. And then properly roll your fleece for easy classing. Not all wool pools do intense classing, but it's just a good habit to get into a proper rolling of the fleece, because when you do go to a wool pool that is going to do classing, it's much easier for them to open up that fleece and class it. Do not store your wool in a poly or polyfeed bag. Getting any of that kind of plastic twine in there is another reason for them to say, out of here. And then keep bags dry and clean and up off the floor if possible, right? So I think there's a 2-year turnaround, 3-year turnaround. At most, you can hold wool up to 3 years before it has to be garbage. A wool pool will not buy it from you. And in 3 years, a lot can happen with moisture and heat and vermin. So sometimes, like I said earlier, wool pools don't necessarily happen every year. So if you want to keep your wool able to go to that market, just kind of keep it clean up off the ground. Okay, so prices and costs. Let me just check on the time. Okay, I'm going to kind of move through this as quickly as possible. So prices and costs. So you will get, and in the announcement, it's going to tell you how much you can expect for your prices. These prices I think are 2018 prices. So these are not this year. Don't go thinking that 45 cents per pound for white wool is this year. It is not, most likely. But you'll get in the letter, they'll typically state what you can expect. You can kind of estimate it off of the national market rates. They're typically in the same range. You'll see all those numbers above, like $3, $2, close to $4 above that. Those are for the Western markets. We in the Northeast get considered as ungraded wool. So just so you know, that's where we're at in the Northeast, is ungraded wool. But let's work to change that, right? Like, give them a reason to consider us graded wool. Costs, there's a bunch of costs, right? So when you'll see that there's cooperative fees, which includes membership fee and handling fee. In some cases, like I said, you want to consider volunteering some of your time, because if you don't, you might get charged a handling fee. And then the cooperative does have dues that will go towards, like it says here, wool sacks, tax return preparation, rental, the fairgrounds, different equipment that they might have to use. So there's some fees associated with the wool pool. And of course, you want to consider your time and your mileage, right? Mileage, I like to go by the IRS rate, because it's not just gas, it's also wear and tear, right? You want to consider these things when you're weighing out the value of making this effort. And some people, it's like, you know what? If I bring it to wool pool, then I don't have to pay somebody to throw it away for me, right? And at least that way, you're not like, you're making a little something, right? It might not be break even, but at least you're bringing something in. Might not be break even, but you're losing less, right? At the very least. So of course, there's miscellaneous equipment in your time. And I say 2-hour work days. The wool pool itself is a work day, and then another day for shearing and skirting, depending on how many sheep you have and how many fleeces you have to skirt and all that. Okay, so value added, these are actually going to move a little quicker, because they're kind of like, oh, wool pool and. So, right, if you can go with your imagination, really, like what is a value added product, anything that you want, and you can do wonderful research about your breed and how best to use your breed for certain products, and talk to other breeders who are raising the breed that you do. But yeah, it really is just endless with a little bit of creativity. The list can be endless. Okay, so What do you want to do and what's the right fit for you? Market, like this is where you want to spend some time doing your research, right? So what market channels do you want to sell through? Who shops there? What are they buying? What do they enjoy? What do they like? You kind of want to understand your customer and your ideal customer. And it's going to be like this iterative process where you go, okay, I want to do this. Oh, nobody's buying that. Well, what can I do to make it sellable? Oh, but that's going to cost me a lot of money. So how, so it's a really iterative process in trying to figure out what product is right for you. You're going to want to do your wool research. I put here the Fleece and Fiber Source book. It's a lovely book. That's actually my copy that I took a photo of and I put it there. And it's just a nice kind of entry point into understanding how the different wool types act and things that you can make out of it. It talks about wool types and the potential end products and characteristics. And it's just a nice little place to start. And it's a lovely book. But talk to, right, I said it before, talk to other producers. What are they doing? What has been their experience at turning that Shetland sheep into sock yarn? Does that work? So supply chain research, you're really going to want to understand what supply chain components are available to you. In the resources, there's a link to, I think it's a Local Fiber link. There's this wonderful map that Local Fiber put together a couple of years ago, and it's all the different supply chain components for the value-added supply chain. So what are those supply chain pieces that you're going to need in order to create your end product? How accessible are they? What is that turnaround time, right? You might be waiting a year in some cases for a product to be created. It's not uncommon from shearing floor to consumer for it to take 3 years, right? So also think about capital. You need to have 3 years worth of capital to kind of cover that period of shearing floor to consumer, right? That's inventory storage. That's a bunch of different things to think about. And then what are the costs and expected prices? Okay, so production, wool pool, and think about reducing that vegetable matter even further. So maybe feeding harvested forage on racks, maybe consider using some coats. I'm gonna just start moving a little quickly through this, so I apologize. Preparation, wool pool, and this is where you want to start thinking about the right shearer. You want a shearer who's really going to consider those second cuts and the wool quality, right? You want to decrease second cuts, so you're increasing the amount of value add that you can create. You're losing less money, basically. You may want to consider getting a special skirting table at this point. It's going to make the process of skirting much more efficient. You're going to start getting more thorough with your vegetable matter removal. More aggressive skirting. And one thing I've heard from mill owners time and again is people need to understand garbage in means garbage out, right? Like if you're sending something with a lot of vegetable matter to the mill, you're going to get a product back with a lot of vegetable matter. A mill doesn't miraculously get rid of vegetable matter. So just bear that in mind. You're going to start thinking about classing and grading, not just skirting. You're going to be thinking about like, okay, here's this fleece. This part is just lovely. And I think like this component, this part of the fleece over here, it would be perfect for like the luster. It's the luster I want for the shawls I want to have woven. But this part isn't as nice. Maybe I'll turn that into yarn. You're going to start thinking about classing your fleeces and sorting and grading and separating them. And again, you don't want to store them long. And this is even more so. This is your end product now, right? The lanolin hardens throughout the season. It gets hot, it gets cold. So you really want to think about moving from your floor to the mill sooner than later. In the meantime, temperature control and pest control would be a nice little bonus if you can do that. There's a bunch of different things to consider in terms of costs and prices, and I encourage people to throw other ideas in the chat, right? So shipping, mill costs, material, packaging, market costs, like we talked earlier about the festivals, they all have costs associated with them. What about those non-value added related costs that you expect your wool to cover, right? Because like you're raising these sheep, and I know that the meat is probably going to cover some of those costs as well, but do you want to somehow account for some of those costs in the fiber production value add as well? And of course, never, never, never forget your labor. Your labor is valuable. And think about what you deserve per hour and see how that can fit into your end product. And of course, I'm sure you can think of many ways, many other components to your labor practices. I'm just peeking at the time because I'm realizing we're getting a little tight. Artisan. So Artisan, again, it's like the most lucrative when you consider price per pound wool. But again, it's a very limited customer base. So you might get, I've seen award-winning fleeces get like $60 a pound, but how many fleeces are you going to sell at $60 a pound, right? So this is where you really do want to consider getting, using those coats. I do know of some producers that don't necessarily use coats on hand spinning fleeces, but they take a lot of care and precautions in other areas. And coats do take, right, they cost money in their own right. And then you have to keep them up and then you have to change them. They're not like, they take work. And again, preparation kind of same as value add and wool pool. And now you're going to be selecting those best fleeces and you're definitely going to be heavily skirting them. In fact, you might, this is where classing comes in again, right? You might see a fleece and be like, oh, this fleece is so beautiful. Somebody will buy this for 30 bucks a pound. But this portion here is kind of, maybe I'll take this portion out, put that towards the yarn pile, and the rest of it I'll sell to the hand spinner, right? So there's some classing involved. Scouring of fleece, I've heard of some people scouring the fleece. The buyer might not appreciate that because it gets into a science, and that science, like pH balances and the wool and the protein formations and all that stuff. And people get really particular about how they want to scour their fleece. And do consider using fall fleeces, right? Because fall, they've been out in pasture, they're not eating the hay in the barn and all covered in all the straw and whatnot. So fall fleeces typically are really lovely. I do want to say that there is a really fun Facebook page called Dirty Fleeces Done Dirt Cheap, which it is what it says, right? This is for like these pristine $30 per pound, $10 per pound fleeces. That's what I'm talking about here. But you can always try, like if you have a fleece that came off and you really don't want to spend that much time skirting it and whatnot, or classing it and whatnot, but you also didn't spend all this time doing the production prep, check out Dirty Fleece Done Dirt Cheap. It's a great way to kind of make a little bit of extra money. Same kind of costs and prices as the value add. One thing that I really want to emphasize here is you are going to spend time skirting and classing here more than anywhere else. So really, you know, people can easily spend an hour classing one fleece in this case, depending on what they're thinking the end product to be. And this is where like getting into some shows and winning some awards can really help you increase those prices, right? The $60 per pound fleece that I'm recalling was actually the Maryland Sheep and Wool, and they were an award winner. I don't think they were award winner that year, even I think it was a previous year. But point is that awards, once you get a name and a reputation, you can kind of charge a little more. I did have some things about breeds, genetics, and nutrition, but right, like I said, I'm not really an expert here. It was more the point that I wanted to make here was that, right, so breed is going to define the type and characteristic. And there's crossbreeds, which is a whole other story. Like you can play with crossbreeding and really try to get in with, you know, certain characteristics and traits that you want to highlight. But if we're talking about pure breed, because it's just easy to talk about pure breed, breed is going to define the type and the characteristic. Type meaning fine wool, long wool, down, dual coat. And then you look at down and dual coat and long wool, that's not going to commodity market. That's going to be strictly value add or hand spinner. But also breed, so that's the left. And on the right are all these characteristics. And what's in yellow is what the breed is going to define, right? So it's yield, average fiber diameter, average staple length. And there's a range for each of these, right? And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir now, so I kind of don't want to waste too much more time on talking about this. But the point I really wanted to say is that, you know, there are things, what matters is, okay, I'll get to this. What matters is what do you want to do to the wool? And then does that sheep give you, like in your pasture, give you joy, right? So in the end, I think I had a statement here somewhere. I can't remember it, and neither is it here. But right, so breed does not indicate quality. Breed does not indicate quality. One person's junk is another person's treasure. Or I say here, one person's treasure, another person's junk. But this what does indicate quality is the production, the preparation, right? All the other things we were talking about before. There are definitely things in nutrition that you want to consider, like you want to keep it constant and not over protein or under protein. You can trace genetics for generations and really try to hone in on certain characteristics of your breed. Like you really like the luster of this border luster, and you like the color of that border. You can work within the breed characteristics, but that takes generations and it takes records, right? You have to keep those records. And you also, in doing that, want to keep records of like environmental effects, because part of the reason why it's going to take generations is that there's environmental effects in play, and you can't always tell when they're playing a role as well. So I actually just kind of said everything that's on these next few slides, which you'll get. And like I said, there's other folks who can speak to this much clearer. I just wanted to give a nod to it because it definitely plays a role. And I thought I'd share just a couple of photos. So this here is, excuse me, kind of like the shearing to skirting steps. And I realize it's probably really small on your screen. On the left, this is actually Karen Stern from Windsong Farms out in Burdett. She's on the floor. She's already skirting when the shearer is shearing. Like, and what you don't see is I'm here taking a photo on top of her, but otherwise I'm actually on the side with a broom ready to sweep up, like clean those floors as soon as between every single sheep we were cleaning those floors. But yeah, the point is she's skirting. She's even doing her skirting while the shearer is shearing. The second image is that throwing of the fleece, that kind of getting rid of those second cuts, spreading that fleece out on the table so you can really get a good picture of it. The third one is the skirting, and that's hard to see, but the reason why I wanted to use this photo is because one of those images, one of those skirting tables is actually a window screen, and I encourage you not to use a window screen. The spaces are really, like, the second cuts aren't going to fall through. You want something that it can give space for those second cuts to fall through, especially. So steer away from window screens if you can. And that's why that was there. This is actually classing. So you can see over on the left, it's all these fibers that are just kind of, these have been stored. They're in clear bags. They're up off the ground. They were stored really properly. Every single one has a note in it. She keeps really good records. The second one is the woman's actually creating like a little measurement chart on the table. So during the classing, she can just do random checks of the measurements and seeing what that fleece generally looks like. In the third picture there, you take random samples throughout the fleece to see how consistent the fleece is and how much classing it's going to need. And then the fourth picture there is, again, this is the same woman who takes really good records, and she wanted to understand the yield that she was getting from fleeces after the skirting. And then the two photos over on the right are classed. These are all broken up into different products. Each one of those boxes is a different product that she wants to create after the classing, and they're ready to ship. After we finished classing that day, she actually just taped it all up, and I think the next day it was off to the mill. This here on the bottom is a picture of one of the wool pools that does fantastic at classing. And I wanted to include this in there because they have 3 different buyers that they sell to. And the reason why they were able to get those 3 different buyers is because they make so much effort in the classing. So they have a variety of different price points that they're able to find for their cooperative members. And so just kind of want to emphasize the role of kind of taking care of a fleece and how classing can play a role in wool pool. And then just a little picture of a sheep with a coat, right? I mentioned you might want to consider coats. So there's a coated sheep and there's a couple of resources for those. There's a couple of videos, which I'm not going to show. And otherwise, top of the hour. Sorry, I filled it out, but didn't mean to. Anything else? Thank you.